Seattle Hempfest 2003. In case you don't believe me. Lovely scenage of Seattle. Domonic Holden, one of the primary organizers of Seattle Hempfest. What's your exact title here?
Director, they call me.
Director, so you get to yell cut and stuff.
If you brought her, you can direct.
Director, Seattle Hempfest. And it's 2003 event, day 2. So glad this is a 2-day event.
It's a lot better with 2 days. It was only 1 day up until 2001. It started in 91, so we had 10 whole years before we realized that we could have twice as much Hempfest, twice as much fun.
Yeah, and this, you really jumped through the same hoops to get the park and stuff, right? So I mean,
you know, it was a real challenge in 2001 getting the use permit from the Special Events Committee so that we could have 2 days. They were very reluctant, in particular the Parks Department, since there was no precedent at all for any special event to have a 2-day permit for a park. There were street fairs, but Hempfest really had to fight tooth and nail.
Really?
It was finally deemed that it was an unreasonable restriction of time, place, and manner to say that Hempfest couldn't use the 2 days in one park because we'd grown so much that we were ready to fill it for 2 days.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much going on here that it's really damn near impossible for one reporter to even touch upon it all.
There's a whole lot. It's absolutely true. We've got 7 stages this year. About 70 speakers, 70 musical performances, including jazz and folk and rock and just everything you can possibly imagine, electronic music. And lots of speakers. We've got Woody Harrelson coming this year.
Excellent.
We've got Dan Savage of The Stranger, Mark Stepnoski, a former Super Bowl champion, and even Rick Steves of the Travel Channel, someone who you might never expect to be a marijuana policy reformer.
Dig it. Tell me about the status of the ballot initiative.
I-75 is scheduled for the primary ballot, September 16th. I-75 makes marijuana possession by adults the city's lowest enforcement priority. It also creates an 11-member panel that reports to the city council that can assess the effects of the ordinance. And basically, the reason that Seattle needs I-75 to pass is because it allows us to use our limited law enforcement resources on dangerous and violent crime, because that's far more of a threat to our community than simply arresting otherwise ordinary adults who happen to smoke pot. Furthermore, it protects our medical marijuana patients and allows us to use our funds for basic public services such as libraries and parks and things like that.
Okay, now the area grounds seem a little larger this year.
Well, there's been construction going on for the last 5 years. We've still got some construction going on, but by next year, for 2004, Myrtle Edwards Park will be the gem in the city's crown. It is the Emerald City after all, and we'll be back to its beautiful green state.
So it'll be 100% ready for use then?
Absolutely it will. We're looking forward to that. This year our main stage has opened back up, but they haven't had a chance to replant the grass, so it's a little bit dusty over there. People seem to be getting through it though. It seems to mix in with the smoke.
Have to be careful with my lens out there. Give me some of the... Is Keith Stroop going to be here this year?
Keith Stroop is indeed here. I just saw him walking in with the normal crew. We've also got Kevin Zeese of Common Sense for Drug Policy. Really a fantastic array of speakers representing all sorts of different drug policy reform organizations. Perhaps most notably, we've got people representing California's medical marijuana cooperative movement who have really faced down challenges by the feds lately, who have tried to shut down the medical marijuana co-ops. And if you've ever grown even a small patch of plants or vegetables in your front yard, you know how hard it is to grow anything.
Yeah.
So expecting someone who is seriously ill with a terminal disease such as cancer or AIDS to grow marijuana for themselves, it's unreasonable. We need these medical marijuana cooperatives. They're standing up to the federal government. We're very proud to host them at Hempfest this year.
Very good. Now, I told you last time I interviewed you how much I enjoyed the Hempilation CD.
Ah, yes.
And I see that there's another one in the works for this year.
That is what we've got planned. We also have a fantastic DVD that people can get.
Oh,
it's called No Prison for Pot. It's the documentary of the 2001 event. It features Woody Harrelson when he first attended Hempfest, and it's a fantastic production.
Excellent. Yeah. Are those available here then?
They are indeed. We have the Hemplennium booth, and we also have the 420 warehouse.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, the whole layout is just very groovy. I mean, like, give them some of the street names you've got. The sidewalks have all been renamed.
We've got Highway 420, we've got Stoneway, we've got Cannabis Cove, Actually, our biggest road is called the Lunday Way. One of our nearest and dearest warriors, Robert Lunday, sadly passed away last year on June 10th, 2002. We have affectionately named this road after him. This is the road that I'm standing next to right now.
Very good. And there's a McWilliams
Way, because what way should you go? You should go the Lunday Way, absolutely.
And there's a McWilliams memorial stage as well.
McWilliams stage named after Peter McWilliams, who's a fantastic activist, and also the author of the book Ain't Nobody's Business If I Do, which is a great thing, a great piece on consensual crimes.
Yeah. How big is the staff this year?
We have 1,200 people who are volunteering. Every single person is a volunteer. We have a 90-person core group that is the hardest working group of people that you've ever seen in your life. And then we have a steering committee of 7 people as well, and none of us get paid. It is truly a fantastic community-based effort because we really want to see our drug policies changed. And Hempfest can act as a litmus test to the general public, to the media, to our politicians, that there's a lot of support for drug policy reform. And that's one of the things that we seek to do here.
Yeah, and you've got a lot of new speakers, new organizations showing up. I know Dan Solano is on the list for Police Officers for Drug Law Reform, which is out of Michigan.
That is true. In addition, we have Jack Cole of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. It's a brand new movement, and perhaps the greatest fear of the federal government is that their own law enforcement would eventually turn on the drug war and start speaking up at events like the Seattle Hempfest.
Yeah, that's exactly what we need, definitely. Let's see, any other points for, have you got a lot of hemp food here this year?
There's quite a bit of hemp food. The DEA this past year tried to overturn the allowance of hemp food to be produced in the United States. We're not allowed to grow hemp domestically, but we can have hemp that is from other countries that we then have as food, which has a very low THC content. You can never get high on it. And that was fortunately challenged by Vote Hemp, and we continue to be able to have hemp food. We have a great booth called Hemp Heaven that you should go visit.
Excellent.
And they've got the most fantastic food and hempy pesto and all sorts of other good things. This year our focus is on hemp for fuel, because hemp biodiesel could easily replace all of our existing fuel needs. We wouldn't have to rely on fossil fuels. We would be able to grow it domestically with a crop that would actually keep our money right here in the United States. We wouldn't have to go overseas for it. We wouldn't have to fight wars to maintain our access to it, and ultimately would also be better for the environment.
Yeah, and the same infrastructure that's processing crude oil into oil could be processing hemp leaves into synthetic gasoline.
They could invigorate our economy at the same time.
So we don't even have to screw those old corporations. They don't have to be afraid of hemp.
Absolutely.
They should join us.
I will say that the vast majority of adults who smoke marijuana are just like all other Americans. They've got jobs, they have families, they pay taxes, they're contributing members of their community. They're certainly not part of the crime problem, and Hempfest is an outstanding way that people can get involved and show that they don't support our current drug policies, stand up for themselves, and we get a chance to teach the choir how to sing. We've got great speakers so that we can all go back to our own communities and remind people how important it is that we stop arresting otherwise ordinary citizens who are otherwise law-abiding. We've got to end the drug war.
Yes, and this inspires people too to come back and start their own events too, and start, realizing that yes, this can be done.
Absolutely right.
And this is being done to the max here in Seattle today, and my headband's off to you, man.
Very good. Thank you so much for coming to Hempfest 2000.
With Chris Conrad, Seattle 2003.
Hi.
And just getting the general flow of hemp happenings in the U.S. We're talking a little bit about rallies and how you don't have to have 100,000 people, although it's really nice. It's a little more than any one person can take in, so I've always pushed for just multiple rallies on the same day, same format. I have this mantra now I'm telling all the other organizers, make your rally as safe, easy, and fun as possible for the average Joe to participate in it. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. Because people are getting more apathetic, more fearful. The attendance in all the Millennium Marijuana marches this year was down, and it's definitely a fear factor thing. I had to cancel calling the media at my South Bend rally because I didn't want to scare the audience.
Well, you guys have that special situation because of Rainbow Farm, I think. You know? Which is, of course, where Tom
Crosland and Raleigh.
Tom and Raleigh got shot down there on their own property, so that's kind of made that area even more, I think, concerned about getting out publicly on it as an issue.
Yeah.
But they've got that wrongful death settlement. My understanding is that Raleigh's son got I don't know how much it was for, but it's several $100,000 at least for a wrongful death settlement on that. So if that makes you feel safer, somebody will make some money if they can't shoot you down in your own home.
And this is right up your alley too. Ironically, when they broke up, Rollins' family and stole his son from him, his foster dad is a former county cop. So his foster dad is the same type of person that killed his real dad.
Yeah.
So that kid, he's being traumatized every day that he's in that false family environment.
That's such a hideous thing what happened there. And actually, let me just mention this then, since we're talking about Tom and Raleigh, is that because of them and because of a couple of other people that we know who've died in the past year or so, we started a drug war memorial online for people to go. And it's when I first got involved with this movement, I thought it was going to be like 2 years, 5 years, Now I've been doing it for almost 15 years, and really for 15 years now. As soon as you say it, you realize it's longer than even I thought. It is 15 years. So in the meantime, I've had a lot of people that I've known who've died, especially in the medical marijuana area, because people use it for medicine. And like Peter McWilliams, of course, a personal friend of mine, died as a result of the federal government taking away his medical marijuana. It's a direct relation to his death. And then Tom and Raleigh shot down by the police. We've had a lot of people who've just died of natural causes along the way too, and so we have the Drug War Memorial. The website is equalrights4all.org. And for people who want to get up there and read about Tom and Raleigh and some of the other people who've fought for this movement and have died. And I find it really inspiring myself, because you see the history of the people who've gone before us, and we're all building upon all this work of other people. And a lot of people haven't even heard of some of the big players on this whole thing. And Tom Forshata, for example, the guy who founded High Times magazine, and he helped to found NORML. And he started out as a smuggler and put some of his money directly into trying to build this movement. And now that was back in the 70s that he died, But I think it's important for people to know that kind of thing and where these guys have come from and what they've contributed and what happened to them, and to honor their work and build on it. So here we are standing between the Seeley stage for Ralph Seeley, who is a Seattle attorney, medical marijuana advocate who died, and then at the far end we've got the Peter McWilliams stage for the author who was killed by the judge who took away his medical marijuana. And so, it's kind of like, in a way, that's what we are. We're in the midst of the shadows of the giants and keeping making progress. And I think we do them honor by being here and by doing the work that we're doing.
Yeah, so the site is kind of like a shattered lives for the people who died then.
Yeah, but for the reformers, a lot of people, they contact me and they say, well, this medical marijuana patient who died or something. But to me, I want the reformers, we can't cover everybody who dies. It's not just an obituary site.
Right.
And equalrights4all.org it's a portal site. You go there and it's got about 12 other websites that are built into that one portal.
Okay.
And so, when you get there, you'll find out information about medical marijuana, legal information, stories of these people, and things like that.
So that would be a useful site to send the press to then.
Yeah, it would be. It's also got religious information about it. I don't know if you're following what's going on in Hawaii right now with the THC ministry.
Yeah, let's talk about that some.
Yeah, actually, what's interesting about that for me is I was working with these guys, quite a few people, working on the idea of trying to unify the different marijuana-based religions or cannabis-based religions under the umbrage of what we call cantheism, a creed of like cannabis, theism like religion, so cantheism, as a way of making relationships between these different groups. But what's happened is I'm working as a court expert now, and so I can't really work on that, building that community the way I was. But in the meantime, some of the people, in particular Roger Christie and people over in Hawaii, have made the THC ministry, and they've had very good success in Hawaii, arguing there's 2 points to it. The first is that you've got the First Amendment protection to freedom of religion. The second is you've got the 14th Amendment, right to your freedom of your no discrimination on the basis of your religious creed. But the other thing is the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which a lot of people are not, we've heard of it because it was passed by Congress to protect the peyote religions in the early 90s. But the Supreme Court ruled it was unconstitutional to enforce it against the states. But they didn't ever rule it was unconstitutional as far as the federal policies are concerned. So technically the DEA is still bound by it, and all these other federal agencies are still bound by it. And so what they've done then is that the state law can't go after them because of the First and the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, and the DEA, which actually should have the same restrictions, also has our Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which they are bound by. And so they've had really good luck in, I should say luck, a lot of success in Hawaii in protecting religious users. You have a card that says, my religion requires mandatory use of cannabis once a day at least. And the reason for that is because they had one where it was voluntary, and the courts ruled that if it's voluntary, you can't do it because because then you're breaking the law. But if it's mandatory, then you're following your conscience and you're following your religion, then it's okay to do it. And so they had to make it mandatory to use it every day, which they did quite willingly, because...
Which religion?
It's called the THC ministry.
Okay.
And now they've had the cards, people who from other states who've gone to Hawaii have gotten the cards and have been protected in other states, like in Arizona, for example. They've had police pull people over, and once the cop sees this card that says, I have a First Amendment right protected by the THC ministry, so far the police haven't even arrested anybody who's had one of those cards. So, in a way, in the mid-90s, I thought after medical marijuana, religious use was the direction to go. I still feel like from a political, constitutional argument that's correct. In fact, the religious use is even more guaranteed by the Constitution than any medical use is. But, I'm glad that in my absence of my being able to do that the other groups have continued on with it and are having a lot of success with it. And it's my pleasure and honor to work with these guys and to help to advance their cause.
Yeah. Very good. I had a question. I forgot it while I was listening about that. What are some of the other campaigns you're involved in currently? Like today, anything in particular today?
Okay, well, today I'm helping out my wife, Vicki Norris, and she can tell you more about this. This is the Cannabis Consumers Campaign, and our position is that a lot of the drug war is based upon lies about pot smokers, and that as long as cannabis users are hiding in the closet and afraid to show who we really are, that the only image that most of the media has and the image that the kids are getting in school is all being given by the other side, which is essentially lies. They're calling us non-productive, amotivated, a drag upon society, non-contributing, etc. And yet we know hardworking people, successful business people, artists, musicians, writers, politicians, actually even lawyers and judges who smoke marijuana and so forth. And so what we're trying to do is to get more people to come out publicly. And there's two levels of that. The first level is where you talk to your family that may not know that you smoke marijuana, and you just say to them, look, I use it and I'm a good person. And because it's like we compare it to the gay rights movement that, as long as the gay people were hiding in the closet, that it was very easy for them to be discriminated against. But once they started showing who they really were, then all the stereotypes of myths fell aside. And you still have your stereotypical gay guy that they show on TV or whatever. We're never going to get away from the stereotypical stoner being shown in the media. But what we can do is to broaden that image to include the rest of us who are not, sitting around watching TV, smoking joints all the time, but are in fact, smoking joints and doing productive things. Paying our taxes and.
Where's the stereotype of the guy who just sits in front of his TV with a can of beer in his hand like a lump,
Yeah, right. And the fact of the matter is, you look at most of the problems, even the way they gather the statistics, they say, well, all these injuries are caused by people with alcohol and drugs. Well, alcohol accounts for 90% of them, and the drugs can account for 10% of them. If you just said all these injuries from drugs, it would be nothing. And from marijuana smokers, it's even really small. In fact, that's kind of interesting because there's a Kaiser Permanente did a longitudinal study on marijuana users, and they found out that people who were in their insurance program who smoked marijuana had no significant difference in mortality rates than the other participants in their program. So, in other words, pot smokers were not more involved in more accidents, were not more this and that. They were just, but then they did a second study, and they found out that people having certain injuries, a high percentage of them smoke marijuana. But you look at it, so they have all these snowboarding accidents, a lot of those people have marijuana in their system. Well, it turns out that a lot of people who snowboard smoke pot and then they snowboard. So of course, if you have snowboard accidents, a lot of them are going to have marijuana in their system because people who smoke pot like to do that kind of stuff. People who smoke if you drink beer and you sit at your home, the worst thing that might happen is you might fall out of your chair, Whereas a pot smoker is less inclined to do that, more inclined to smoke pot and then go out and do something interesting. And so, if you're doing those kind of things where people get injured, of course, it doesn't mean that smoking marijuana is causing you to get injured. It means that people who smoke pot like to do things that are a little riskier, and so the chance of getting injured is a little higher. But I think it's kind of a fascinating thing when you look at the way that they give you these numbers. They make it sound one way, and a really good example is there's this Baltimore trauma study where they did this in Baltimore, Maryland. It's 1,067, I think, trauma cases, meaning people came into the emergency room with injuries, and they said 1 out of 3 of them have THC in their system, and that included people, in car accidents. So they suddenly said, well, if only 1 out of 10 Americans smokes marijuana, and 1 out of 3 people in these car accidents, then marijuana must be really heavily involved in car accidents, right? That was what they were trying to say.
1 out of 10.
And then we looked at the numbers, and it turns out that only 2 out of 100 of the people in the car accidents were driving who had THC in their system.
Oh, man.
So if 1 out of 10 is regular smoker and only 2 out of 10 were behind the wheel in the accident, that means fewer people were having accidents when they were under the influence of marijuana. But yet the news reports said just the opposite. They said that you were 30 times as likely to, and in the fact of the matter is you were like 1/5 as likely to. You know, it's just they take these numbers and they just pull one piece of a study and then they give you that in the news, but in the reality, and the other thing is a smoking study where they say, oh, smoking marijuana is 4 times as dangerous as smoking cigarettes. But you look at 400,000 people a year die from smoking cigarettes. Nobody has ever died in history from smoking marijuana. Well, they can't be 4 times as
Little on
dangerous.
the same thing. And even normal people have told me they think that the tar in cigarettes is equivalent to the resin in pot. And it's not. You can tell right away because resin is water soluble and mucus soluble. And tar isn't.
Right.
Tar, you need an industrial solvent to break that up. But your lungs are filled with this nice mucus that breaks up the resins and uses them.
And the other thing that we know is that, you know, that marijuana smokers have a tendency to have coughing and stuff like that, but a lot of that has to do with that it helps to keep the congestion broken up, and so they ultimately end up having clearer breathing passages. In fact, you know, wheezing and stuff connected with emphysema, they see less of that in marijuana smokers than they do in the cigarette smoking population, certainly. But even apparently, according to the general population, the marijuana smokers, they cough more, but they clear their lungs out in the course of doing that. And so, but where's the news articles on that, you know? And so, and the endocannabinoids, you know, oh, marijuana's bad, you know. And, well, first off, you know, you say, well, according to the Bible, God created it, so how bad can it be? God said it was good.
Yeah.
But then the other thing is that when you actually look at the overall demographic of who's using it, you find out that marijuana smokers are less likely to be involved in violence, less likely to be involved in crime, more likely to be involved in contributing to the community, more likely to be involved in doing volunteer work, more likely to be involved in recycling and programs like that. You say, well, these are the people that I would rather spend time with, frankly, you know? And so when you're at an event like this and you see the community of the cannabis users, you know, you realize, yeah, and, you know, there's a certain element that because marijuana smokers are so accepting that I don't know, I won't say the darker side, but there's an element of society that that finds its way in with us because we're more tolerant of them, you know. But that doesn't mean that they then should embody what marijuana smokers are all about, because, you know, we're a very, very diverse group. And when you come to Hempfest, you get a little bit of a skewed idea because it's a sunny day, so you're going to see a lot of people with, you know, wearing laid-back clothes and so forth. But, you know, if you saw these people during the week, a lot of these people be in suits and ties.
I remember my spiritual question. Is there anything in the Quran about cannabis?
Not that I know of. I haven't seen anything. There's a story of Buddha, not a Buddha, of Muhammad with alcohol, where he was going up the hill and he saw some men who were playing a game of, it wasn't cards, but at the time, but a dice or something. Some kind of a gambling game. Are you familiar with the story?
Yeah, the dice.
Yeah, with the dice. And so he sees somebody who's going up the hill, and they're like, oh, they're playing dice, and they're drinking wine, and they're having a good time, and how sweet that is. And he goes up and he prays, and he comes back down the hills, and there's one dead on the ground, and, you know, there's been a terrible fight, and you know, the table is knocked over, and the dice are laying around, and there's someone dead, and these people are prisoners being led away, arrested. So what happened? Well, they were drinking and they're gambling, and they got into this fight. So he said they shouldn't drink anymore. But there's no corollary story to marijuana, you know, even though hash use is extremely heavy in that area. And so it's been interpreted, therefore, as cannabis as being an accepted part of it, whereas alcohol is rejected by the Muslim belief.
Yeah, because there's certainly nothing negative in there about it.
Yeah, no, there's nothing negative about it. And, you know, that's kind of an interesting thing, because when it's like in the Constitution, it says in the 9th Amendment that all the rights that are not designated to the federal government, that are not enumerated and given to the federal government, are retained by the people and by the states. And so the idea is that unless you're specifically told not to do something, then it's okay to do it. You look through the whole Bible, there's nothing in there that says to not smoke marijuana. It's just not in there, folks, you know? And I've talked to a lot of these fundamentalists, and they'll try to twist and tort and pervert and extrapolate something out of a statement about witchcraft or a statement about
your body's
else.
a temple,
or do what the government tells you, you know, but Jesus didn't do what the government told him to. In fact, he was crucified for rebellion, you know? So, you know, to say that he's an example of you should do what the government tells you to is obviously not right. But the more important thing that I was getting at is It's the same with the Constitution. If marijuana was such a big problem, it would be mentioned in the Ten Commandments. Jesus would have said something about it. The fact that none of them, it's not in the Ten Commandments, there's no restriction on marijuana, it's not mentioned anywhere in the Bible that you shouldn't use it, and it's not meant, Jesus never said one negative thing about it, tells you quite clearly it's not a big problem. The only big problem is the society, the governments have wound upon it as a way of like targeting a specific group in society and discriminating against them. And that's what America is supposed to be about, is equality. And so the fact of the marijuana laws is just a slap in the face of the founders of this country. And especially you look at Thomas Jefferson and George Washington, who grew hemp under current federal law would be put to death. Yeah. That tells you that this country has gone very far astray from what it was supposed to be.
Yeah, it's a damn shame, too.
But let me talk about a couple of other projects that I was involved, that I'm currently involved with.
A couple steps this way.
Yeah, we already talked about the Cannabis Consumers Campaign. I presume you'll talk to Nikki more about that. We also have the Human Rights and the Drug War Project, which shows the faces of people in prison and tells their stories. Because a lot of people are under the impression that the prisoners are a revolving door and you know, no one's really in jail for pot. You know, we've got people in jail for pot for 20 years or more.
There was a recent study even, they mentioned that someone came on Crossfire, someone said 20% of the people there are for drugs. And that's amazing. So I guess most of the pot people who are doing time are doing it for prohibition violations.
Yeah, a lot of it is for that. Yeah, because it's like, well, what will happen is, because I work as a legal expert, that's the other area I wanted to talk to you about. Yeah. But what will happen is someone will get, I'll just give you a typical example in California. Somebody gets in trouble, they got a doctor's recommendation, they're growing medical marijuana, the police come in and arrest them anyway. They say, well, we think you're selling it. So then, you know, you fight it and you explain, well, this guy wasn't selling it. So then they'll say, look, you know, we can make this simple. You know, he can either go to court, fight it out, he may go to prison and lose and go to prison, or on the other hand, you can just take this deal now. Possession of more than an ounce. It's no big deal. It's a simple misdemeanor, you know, and you don't have to worry about this felony conviction. So then a lot of times people say, look, it's going to cost me 20 grand to fight this. I don't have the money. I'll take this. So then now that's all fine and dandy. But the only thing is now they're under the control of the parole department and the probation department and the probation officer. And it, you know, back in the 60s and the 70s, those guys' job was to try to help you get your life together. After prison, the idea of probation and parole was to help you get your life together and fit back into society. Starting in the 1980s, that changed. Their job became to screw you and get you back into prison as quick as they can, to punish you for anything that you do wrong. And so people will take a deal that sounds like a good deal, and then sometime in the next 18 months or so, when they're still under probation, they're going to wind up getting caught again with the joint and with the doctor's recommendation, and then their probation violation is going to set it because they don't have that argument of going to the front of the judge and say, Your Honor, you know, it's my medical use and da-da-da. It's going to be like they're in front of a parole officer, and the parole officer says, you failed this your urinalysis, and so it doesn't matter that you've got a doctor's recommendation, etc. And so people end up back in jail, even though they originally made a plea that was supposed to keep them out of jail, because you can't live up to the plea.
And that's a hard statistic to find, apparently, because nobody seems to have found that.
Yeah, it's totally hidden. And then the other thing that we see is that there's certain people who are legitimately doing bad things. And the police, when they catch them, they don't think that they can get them for what they were doing legitimately bad, but they do know that if they had a joint or something on it, that they can slam them for that. And so, like, I was involved in a case where there was a guy who was harassing a teenage girl, you know, which to me is a rather contemptible thing. You know, he was like following around, you know, in a way, dirty old man hitting on a little teenage girl. I mean, that's not something that's unknown in history, you know. I mean, it doesn't mean he needs to go to prison or whatever. But she felt threatened, she felt harassed, she called the police. The police came, they searched him, and they found some pot on him, so they charged him with intent to sell marijuana. Why? Because he was only looking at, like, you know, 30 days for harassing the teenage girl, but for the marijuana, they thought they could send him to prison for 2 years. And so, you know, I went in there, I defend him. I wouldn't defend him on the matter of, and I'm not an attorney, I'm a marijuana expert, but I wouldn't have, you know, what he was doing for the chasing around the teenage girl or whatever, if they wanted to try him on that, I would have said, well, you know, you got him. He's like screwed up. He shouldn't have done that. But because he was going after him for the marijuana, I wound up in court, you know, tried to defend him, and we actually got him off and so forth. And it makes me feel kind of weird because I still think what he did was the wrong thing by harassing the teenage girl, but I think the police were completely wrong trying to send him to prison for 2 years for marijuana because they didn't like the fact that he was harassing this girl. And so it becomes a matter of convenience. It's like anything, they can stop you for anything. If they find pot on you, then all of a sudden they can really slam you, even though the other things, they may not have anything on you, you know. And I think that this is this is like one of the huge flaws of the way the government has treated this, is that drugs become this catch-all where if they don't like you and they can't catch you do anything wrong, they can set you up with drugs and send you away for a long time, and that's one of the reasons why they're keeping the drugs, and marijuana specifically, illegal the way they are, because this is a handy device that allows them to take away people's freedom.
It's a great way to bust somebody after the fact. That's a great example of what you just said there of how hard it is to enforce laws for predatory crimes and how easy it is to pull an illegal search on someone and find some pot.
Right, exactly. And then when the illegal search falls apart, then, and what I think that I wondered about is, it's like for this girl's parents, if they come up to me and they said, well, this guy was a jerk and you helped him get off, I would have to say, the problem is that you should go complain to the DA that he should have charged him for what he did, not for making up something, because they charged this guy with intent to sell marijuana. They had no evidence of that. No evidence at all to support that argument.
On your shirt? Oh, dig it, yeah, thanks.
But in the meantime, because we do have the medical marijuana law implemented in California, I'm working with a group we call Safe Access Now, that's trying to create a safe harbor. The way the law works in California is that you're immune from, well, you're not immune. Well, in a way, you have limited immunity from prosecution and incarceration if you have a doctor's recommendation for marijuana.
As long as the federalities don't tolerate it.
Yeah, that's a state law, not a federal law. But the Supreme Court has already ruled that the state law and the federal law do not have to be the same, and that the state doesn't have to enforce federal law. So, the feds can come in and arrest anybody anytime for anything, especially with this terrorism thing. They can arrest you for anything. It doesn't matter anyway. Ashcroft has eviscerated the Constitution. In fact, right now they're threatening judges, Ashcroft is.
Yeah.
So we know it's getting pretty hairy. But the other side of that, like I said, is that under state law you are protected, but you're not protected from arrest. And so what we're trying to do is create what we call a safe haven or a safe access zone where patients or caregivers who are legally protected under the law will be left alone as long as they don't have more than a certain amount. And what we are advocating with our organization, Safe Access Now, which is safeaccessnow.net is our website, is that the federal government, who says marijuana is not a medicine, actually has a program where they make medical marijuana available to patients in the federal IND, Investigational New Drug Program. They give them, the base amount is 6 pounds of marijuana per year. And the federal government did a study on cultivating marijuana, and they find that you get a half an ounce outdoors of bud per square foot of canopy in a garden. And so what we've done is we've taken the combination of those two things. But we don't think patients should be smoking the leaf. So we say, well, let the patients in California have half of what the federal baseline is. That's considered reasonable. Maybe not all patients need as much as the federal government gives them, but half that much should be acceptable. That's 3 pounds of marijuana per patient per year. And in order to get that, in order to make it be the good quality bud that we believe patients deserve, not the crummy leaf that we think should be composted, then what they have to do is they have to have 100 square feet of canopy area, 100 square feet of garden area per patient per year. And then within that, it doesn't matter how many plants. It could be 1 plant, it could be 1,000 plants. If it's not big and it makes 100 square feet of canopy, you should get about 3 pounds out of it. And so what we're saying is 99 plants. And the reason is because under the federal law, you get 5 years in prison for 100 or more plants. So this way, the state asserts its jurisdiction at 100 plants, because under state law, it's only 3 months to a year in prison for that. Or 3 years at the maximum if they throw on some other charges. And so, what we're saying is that we're trying to get the counties in California to recognize if you have less than 3 pounds, if you have less than 100 plants, if it's less than 100 square feet of canopy area, that's reasonable for an individual patient to have, or for a caregiver to provide per patient per year. And we've gotten 2 counties to adopt it, the counties of Sonoma and the county of Humboldt. We've gotten other counties to adopt it partially, like many counties allow patients to have 2 pounds of the year, or they might allow only like 72 plants or even 20 plants. And, some counties are still lower, 6 plants and 1 pound or so. But what happens in those counties, though, is that we go into the courts and we present the information, and we've had, even though the county might say you only have 6 plants, we've had patients with 100 plants or more get acquitted by juries, or the charges dismissed by judges, by using these arguments of what is reasonable based upon the federal government's. So it's interesting that we're using the federal studies in order to protect patients under state law who are not protected under federal law. And that's one of the great, working in the legal system, it's amazing the way we have to work with such convoluted logic to achieve what seems quite simple.
Yeah.
It's legal to have medical marijuana. It's legal to grow medical marijuana if you have a doctor's approval. Leave them alone. and yet we have to do all this tying together federal and state and all these to get, and yet we're doing it quite successfully with it. That whole process is coming along really well. That's safeaccessnow.net.
Okay, so now as a court expert on cannabis, when did you first start doing that?
The first case I did was, I think it was in '95.
So you've been doing this 7, 8 years?
Yeah,
now.
and actually that was interesting because an industrial hemp case, and the judge ruled I was an expert, but he ruled that he wasn't going to accept my testimony anyway.
Oh, nice.
So then the next time I was actually in court was after medical marijuana was legalized in California, which is in '96. The first case was in '97. And since then I've done more than 300 cases. I've testified in court more than 70 times. I've qualified as an expert in 30 different California counties, plus I've qualified as send information and declarations to 5 other states, including Alaska, Washington, Oregon, Illinois, and I forget what other state. And also I've testified by declaration in Australia and New Zealand and Canada, and also in the United States federal courts. So I've got a really good track record on this whole thing. And the reason for that I'm able to do this is because I gained my experience of growing and working with marijuana over in Europe. And so whereas many Americans have similar knowledge available to them and similar levels of expertise, most of them did it illegally in the United States. And that's where so you can't go in there and as soon as you say, raise your oath, say, well, I testify under oath that I broke the law. Well, that's self-incrimination. So I don't have to do that. I testified under oath, yes, I worked over in Europe where it was legal to do this stuff, and that's how come I know this, plus all the studies I referred to. So I'm in I won't say a unique situation, but in a relatively rare situation. And one of the goals I would like to do is to set up an opportunity where we can create a class structure to train other people in America here to have the expertise to go into court, because I can only do so many cases.
Yeah.
There's a lot more people who need it. A lot of people don't even know there is such a thing as a court expert. A lot of attorneys don't even know the stuff that I get involved in. One of the things I do as an expert a lot of times is I teach the attorney the nuances of the law and the nuances of how marijuana cultivation and possession and consumption work, how medical use applies, and lifestyle things like, a very common thing is the police would come in, they'll find somebody's house, they've got 4 different bags of marijuana, they say, oh, they must be selling it, because why else would they need 4 bags? Well, they might need 4 bags because they've got 4 different kinds of marijuana.
Yeah, that's the first thing I think.
Or sometimes there'll be 4 bags because, like in California, there's a distinction in the law. If you have 28.5 grams or below, it's a misdemeanor. If you have 28.5 or above, it's a different kind of misdemeanor. There's still a misdemeanor though. But so a lot of patients, they'll take their marijuana, they'll break it into bags that weigh less than that, so that if they're ever stopped by police, that they're in the lowest level of an offense. And so, they might buy, a pound or something, but if they're going to travel, they're going to break it down to these smaller amounts so that they don't have that risk of getting charged with the larger amounts. And then, of course, the police find several bags like that, and bingo, they're in trouble. So I get to talk about that. Or the fact that you have a Grateful Dead poster on the law doesn't mean that you're a pot dealer. Or that if you have a pipe in your bedroom, that doesn't make you a pot dealer.
Or a rally shirt on your chest.
Yeah, and the police will try to construct your lifestyle into something that makes you into a marijuana dealer. Like a good example is they had a box full of baggies in their kitchen. And if they have marijuana in the living room and a box full of baggies in the kitchen, they say that makes you a dealer. I say, well, my mom keeps a box full of baggies in her kitchen, and she's not a marijuana dealer. And juries can understand that, but the thing is, if the defendant says that, then everyone says, oh yeah, sure, they're just saying that because they're trying to get off the hook. Yeah. Even though it's obvious to us, the only way to get it in the court is to have an expert come in and say that. And so that's where having somebody like me, even if you can understand it completely yourself, a defendant cannot say it with credibility because they'll always think, well, they have an ulterior motive. They're just trying to, lie to get off the hook. Whereas I get in there, I have no ulterior motive. I'm just talking common sense, and the jury can see that.
Well, if you start up that training program, let me know. I mean, I'd have to GQ myself up probably to do it. Well,
the other thing is that I've never sold marijuana ever in my whole life. And so I don't have to worry about under oath having them come in there and say, did you ever sell marijuana, and me having to confess to a crime. I don't have to worry about them coming up with somebody saying, I bought marijuana from him. Yeah. So, in order to do this, you really have to be extremely clean. And I am, for my own purposes throughout my life, I thought certain things I would not do, and that included selling marijuana.
You're clean enough to run for president.
Almost, except that they would find out what all I've been up to in Holland. I think somehow it would come back. because like when I go to Holland, it's legal to do that. I don't have any problems with it. And but unfortunately, a lot of Americans have this impression that wherever you go, you're supposed to do whatever's legal in America, regardless of what's legal in the other countries. And
isn't that just the most ignorant thing today?
Yeah, but you run into that.
Like McCaffrey goes to Holland, and what's he do?
Yeah, hangs out with the hookers. Yeah.
Well, there's a great article in Cannabis Culture about McCaffrey visiting and talking to the drug authorities in Holland, and them being interviewed by Cannabis Culture later, saying, well, this McCaffrey guy came in and he was like in another world or something, and totally unreasonable.
He was a total jerk.
We tell him something and he'd cock his head to the side and be all confused.
Yeah. Well, one of the things about McCaffrey, who's no longer our drug czar, that's interesting about Holland, though, is that he made this statement that because of marijuana being legal in Holland, which is not technically legal, of course, but he said it was legal, because of that the crime rate in Holland is 4 times greater than the United States, and it turns out that was completely backwards, especially in murder rates. We have more than 4 times as many. So they went down an analysis of what crime is there in Holland that's 4 times as common as it is in the United States. And you know what it turned out to be? Bicycle theft. The only crime they could find is 4 times as common in Holland as it is in the United States. So in order to justify his statement, they had to go all the way to bicycle theft.
Which is probably their version of Grand Theft Auto, though. So
At least one person on the job full time, civil servants, pulling bikes out of the canals.
Yeah.
Pulling bikes out of the
canals. Yeah, I guess people don't steal them. You steal a bike, enjoy, ride to where you're going. Just throw in the canal. That sounds sick. I'm glad I wasn't a teenager in Amsterdam.
Yeah, that'd be pretty bad.
It wouldn't have turned out all that good.
Have you ever visited a Canadian hemp field?
Not a Canadian one. I've been to Swiss, German, Dutch. Other ones, but not Canadian.
Okay.
It's kind of a drag, Actually, I've been to an American hemp field. I was at the one that was grown in California with the Department of Agriculture.
Oh, wow. That got bulldozed.
Back in '94, yeah. And you know what really caused that to happen, though, which is very discouraging to me.
Some inside story here.
Yeah, I want to give you an inside story because I think there's a real message for our movement in that, which is this. That there was an individual in Minnesota who had applied for a license to grow hemp. And Minnesota state law allowed him to do that, but he needed a federal license.
Right.
And he applied for it and he could not get the federal license. Meanwhile, another group in California used a different tactic. They went to the Department of Agriculture, which doesn't have to get a license, and they got an experimental permit with the Department of Agriculture to grow a field of hemp. So this individual, well, they didn't keep it very quiet. People started finding out about it. And this individual in Minnesota decided that it wasn't fair. He said he could grow it under state law, and he applied for a federal permit, and it wasn't fair that the people in California were growing it. And so he started calling the California Attorney General's office, complaining about it, because he thought he should be the first one to grow it. And as a result of repeated calls by somebody who's wanted to grow hemp, who claims to be on our side, the California District Attorney General's office sent into federal property, which is actually illegal in itself, California law enforcement to cut down this hemp field and to destroy it. And to me, this is I see a lot of this in our movement, of people who feel like they're entitled to get the credit, they're entitled to something because they've worked so hard in this movement, that they don't understand that if he had just kept his frigging mouth shut and let that happen in California, we would be much further off, and it would have helped him to get his license in Minnesota. Yeah. But instead, because of his own egotistical issues, he decided to bring it down, and he set us back 10 years at least by doing what he did. And this is something I really want to get across to people in the movement, is you gotta get your ego out of this thing and realize we are a cause, we're a movement, we're working together. It's not about who gets the credit for XYZ thing, it's let's achieve it together. There's room later on to get credit. Once this is legalized, we can all claim we're the one who did it. But in the meantime, let's work together and get the laws changed and forget the bullshit,
Plus, once it gets legalized, 3 years later, no one's going to care who did it.
Yeah, right, and just this whole idea that somebody, and then again, we had history visit us again in California when Ed Rosenthal got arrested on February the 12th in 2002. Got hit the same day. It turned out that what led to that was that there was one dispensary that had closed down, and the person who was running it was trying to get someone else to take it over, and it was a dispute over who would take control of that one club. That one person who wanted to get control of it turned in everybody else so that he could get control of this one particular club. And supposedly they're all there to help the patients, blah, blah, blah. But then in order to get control of the given club, the one person is going to send 6 other people to prison for 10 years in order to fulfill his own. He should be the one who has control of that club. And, you know, I mean, to me, it really speaks of, this has been the system that the empires have used for a long time. It's like the Romans would go in and they would help one group, one tribe against another until they had destroyed all the tribes, and then they would take over. The whites came to America and they pitched one Indian tribe against another until the whites took over. If we as a movement divide amongst ourselves, we're never going to be able to overcome them.
That's what we're supposed to be doing to their side.
Yeah, divide and conquer is the oldest technique. We need to learn how to divide and conquer them, not to be divided ourselves. We need to learn how to divide and conquer them, not to be divided ourselves.
ISIS, most creative, intelligent people that I know. And as a pot smoker myself, I feel personally that I have a stake in my place in society. I am so sick of being treated like a second-class citizen, like a criminal that is so undeserved. I'm not criminally minded in any way. I'm an honest person. And I feel like I'm a contributing, compassionate person. And I feel like, why is this government spending their money going after good people like me and people on this panel and people out here at Hempfest? It's a waste of money. They're throwing our taxes, our hard-earned dollars that we're paying for this government, down the toilet to go after good people. What is the sense of that? They're not helping anything. They're destroying a lot of lives. The problem with our current situation is that we're living in a state of constant vulnerability to a definition that they have created about us. Because they have put us in a criminal class or a second-class citizen, we are subjected to the threat of arrest, the threat of loss of our jobs, the threat of loss of our children, the threat of loss of benefits on many levels, and of course the threat of incarceration. And that threat is so real for so many people, to the tune of over 700,000 arrests a year, which costs a lot of money and hardship on families, and not to mention all the people that are sitting in our prisons today. We just heard from this guy who, I also am co-author of the book Shattered Lives, Portraits from America's Drug War, so I've seen the devastation of what this drug war has done.
Come on and sit down, everybody.
And what we've seen, this one guy, James Geddes, just got out of prison in the state of Oklahoma after doing 11 years for 5 marijuana plants. And this kind of thing is still going on in this country. There's many, many people serving 5, 10, 20-year life sentences just for marijuana. And this is, so marijuana prohibition and the harsh consequences of it are very real, and we have to say no. This is unacceptable. It's undeserved. We don't belong in that class of criminality with other people who are violent, who are hurting other people, because we are not hurting anybody, and we're not doing anything bad to ourselves. In fact, if you come to our booth, I can talk to you more about it. I have postcards about our campaign on our website where we are collecting survey forms of people who are ready to come out of the closet to change the image, so we get to define ourselves, who we are. As how many people here are cannabis consumers? Okay, just almost everybody. Okay, and I'm sure you, hopefully, you know, you look all like very nice people. You're not hurting anybody. You're sitting here having a nice time at Seattle Hempfest, right? Anyway, online on our survey forums, I'm gathering all kinds of very interesting information about who we are. And what we need to do with this is start defining ourselves. They can't define us. They're doing a terrible job. The government and the media is doing a terrible job of defining who we are as cannabis consumers. So we have to define ourselves. And what I found is that we come from all walks of life. We are teachers, students, business people, CEOs of major corporations. We're athletes, we're musicians, we are working people, we're computer technicians, we're web designers, we are, throw it out. What are some of your occupations out there?
Engineer. Wildland firefighter.
Firefighter? All right.
Medical marijuana grower.
Psychologist.
What's that? Psychologist.
How do you
I
feel
mean,
about
look
that?
at us. We come from all walks of life. And the great thing about it that I'm finding out that we give to charities. We're very giving of a group. We give back to our communities. We're not a drain on society. We give back to our communities. Many people volunteer on many levels. Many people have responded. I asked them on our survey forum, how has cannabis enhanced their lives? And many people feel that cannabis even makes them better people. So it makes them more compassionate, makes them more tolerant of diversity. And I find that very interesting. It helps them connect with nature. It brings out a more empathetic side to their personalities, less hostile. People who are depressed, it helps their spirits in many ways. It makes people feel more connected with the universe, gives them a sense of spirituality, a sense of creativity. And it does all these great things for people. Now, I don't believe that cannabis is for everybody, and not everybody likes it. And we're not even advocating that everybody use it. But we are advocating for our equal status in society, equal with our alcohol drinking and tobacco smoking peers. That's basically the bottom line. Leave us alone if we're not hurting anybody. Give us a legal market so we can get access to our cannabis at a reasonable price. Be able to grow a small personal amount for our own personal needs and possibly to share with our friends. And this is what we're asking. And to tax it, because we want to give back to our communities. We want our tax dollars to go to something good. And how many people here would be willing to pay a reasonable tax for a legal market where you can go into a coffee shop and buy it? Yeah. Okay. And so, you know what? I say, in these times when people say, oh, no, it's too many taxes, we have a willing group of people here that are ready to go and pay our taxes. We want to tax. So I say tax us. Tax us. We'll pay our fair share.
Marijuana tax. Marijuana tax. Marijuana tax.
Yeah, and give us our freedom in exchange, because we deserve nothing less than that, because we are good people. We are not criminals. We're good. We're amongst the best people in society. In fact, I'm starting to think that cannabis even is attracted to people who are, good and intelligent, because it likes to make people like to think on cannabis. Just think in a different way. So anyway, I invite you to our booth to check out what we're doing there. We are taking photos here at the Hempfest, where people can come out of the closet, make a little statement. We have a video project going where we're hoping to get aired on cable to start putting out there our own definition of who we are, what cannabis is, and how basically we should have equal rights in society. So thank you, and we'll take questions after, but I'm going to pass the mic on to our next speaker. Would you like to say, Jack? You ready?
All right, Jack.
Jack Harrer.
Pot is the best definition you can have for bringing a longer life. What I'm meaning by that is you get 2 years longer if you smoke pot every day and you don't have any problems at all with any other drugs. You still live 2 years longer if you smoke pot. You got to be out of your mind not to talk about pot. 30 years ago, I read this, and holy shit, If you do alcohol and tobacco, you get 8 to 24 years off your life. And you don't do anything at all, a bit 8 to 24 years more to the life. But if you smoke pot, 10 to 26 years more for your life. Holy shit, 2 years extra. And that is against the law. The only thing you have to do is stand up and tell everybody what I am telling you. And I can be, if Jack Hare is wrong, you have a $100,000 land if Jack Hare is wrong. But I'm not wrong. And what the fuck does the government say? They are 2 years longer? I don't believe it. But believe it.
The government lies.
Costa Rica and Jamaica in the early 70s and the early 80s, when that experiment was done, 2 years longer. That is, and I'll tell you, every single bit of it is wonderful. Because I don't know what it is, I know what I feel, and I feel right. And you too.
You gotta feel it to believe it.
Passion for the masses. Very privileged to be out here with so many good people, so many well-known people. I'll just tell you a little bit about how I got started and decided to come out as a public pot smoker and get involved in politics. I was sitting in my home about a year ago and I heard a helicopter coming. And I've never grown marijuana, had never been arrested on any kind of drug charge, and I live in a really tiny Alabama town. They didn't know me. And I didn't think anything about the helicopter because they fly about that time of year every year looking for the crops, and so I figured it'd make a pass and keep going like they usually do because I wasn't growing pot. And instead, they decided to stay over my home for about an hour, and I really got upset, so I grabbed my video camera and I went outside and started taping the helicopter harassing me. And in about 2 or 3 minutes, I had 7 government agencies and big unmarked black SUV vehicles pull up on my property without a warrant and jump out and begin to search. I asked them to leave. I told them they had no business there, and they said, well, we're going to go get a warrant if you don't let us search your property. So I said, okay, you can search outside because I know there's nothing here. But I stood up to them. I said, you know, in Alabama, we don't have money to send toilet paper to our schools for our kids. The parents have to send stuff like that. But you have the money to fly around helicopters and trying to break families apart all because of a green plant. And they got really upset. So I went back in to get my video camera. I told them I'm going to videotape you searching my property. And all of them just piled back up in their vehicles and ran away really, really fast. They didn't want to be taped. After that, I wrote a letter to the editor of the Birmingham News calling for legalization. I decided that if that was the way it was going to be, then I'm not playing by their rules. I'm not going to play their game. I'm going to get involved. I wrote a letter and they published it, and a local police officer read the letter, and he was also the school resource officer. He worked at the school where my children attend. He read the letter, and then he interrogated my 5-year-old daughter in her kindergarten classroom and claims that she said we had bright green leaves growing on our ceiling that I was throwing out the back door. And a judge in Alabama signed a search warrant. They came into my house and no one was home when they got there. They claimed they found less than a gram of marijuana, and they're trying to send me to prison for 2 years for it. I'm representing myself. I've started the U.S. Marijuana Party as a result, and in about 10 months we've gotten over 25 states have started parties. We're going to be running hopefully a presidential candidate in 2004. We're going to be running at every party. It's going to be state, national, and local government. We're getting involved in every aspect of politics that you can, because that's where it starts. Look at California. They have green people on their city councils, and things are really getting done there. And so in order to change the government and change the laws, we have to become involved in the democratic process. You can also look at Canada, what they've been able to do by starting marijuana parties. They've made their government address the issue, and it's almost legal there now. In Ontario right now, you can have under 30 grams and it's legal to have. They won't arrest you, don't take it away from you. I got tired of, it's a police state. We have police in our schools telling our children, children have become the equivalent of microphones for a Big Brother. They can say anything to your kids. If your kids slip up and say something odd, they can get a search warrant and come in your house. I've never lied to my children. I don't lie to my kids about what I do, and but you know, she said something about green leaves on the ceiling. There was no marijuana there, especially no plants. But I just want to let you know, I have a booth down by Main Stage. It's the U.S. Marijuana Party booth. I've got some good literature. If there's not a party in your state, please consider starting one or supporting one that's already there. And look for us on the ballot in 2004. Thanks a lot.